Sanity prevails. Medevac is gone. Australia is back in control of its borders, not the advocates, not the idiots, and not two people on Skype.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that was Sky's Paul Murray applauding the government's big win in scrapping Medevac. Doctors will now not have the power to get sick people transferred from Nauru and Manus Island. And as the Home Affairs Minister puts it, the back door into Australia has been closed. So, not surprisingly, when Peter Dutton joined Murray for a celebratory chat, the backslapping was mutual.
Congratulations to you and your team for staying the course, fighting the good fight and sanity prevailing.
Thanks very much, Paul. I really appreciate it. To you and to your listeners, thank you very much for pushing hard for what's a common sense outcome.
But for Tasmanian crossbencher Jackie Lambie, who delivered the crucial swing vote, it was not a simple decision. As she told Parliament emotionally,
do I repeal the legislation or let it sit there? Not as perfect as the activists would have you believe, but not as terrible as the media loudmouths would have you believe either.
No prizes for guessing who those media loudmouths might be. But it wasn't just the Sky News commentators or News Corp columnists that Lambie had in mind. According to her, the campaign to repeal Medevac was also being waged in the news columns.
The usual suspects in the newspapers can make a big song and dance about someone coming because they've got a cold or whatever it is they're talking about. I've got to be honest, my rule throughout this whole process has been that if it's on the front page of the newspaper and it's anything to do with Medevac, it's probably not worth reading. But they dial up the outrage that a person is coming for a medical treatment because they've got a cold or a bee sting or a kidney stone.
Or even, as this front-page screamer in Brisbane's Sunday Mail claimed last month, because of a damaged penis.
Small package delivery.
Exclusive.
Botched penis enlargement wins violent refugee entry to Australia. Medevac's temporary erection visa causes a big problem down under.
Yes, it was the perfect tabloid yarn to bring Medevac into disrepute, syndicated to News Corp papers around the country. And naturally, politicians and the rest of the media ate it up.
This person seems to be someone who's creating real problems.
40,000 people on waiting lists in Victoria, and this bloke does something pretty untoward to himself and he gets a golden ticket to Australia.
The laws need to be repealed, and here's a fantastic example of why.
So, was the story true? Well, we can't be sure, but refugee advocates insisted it was not and were busy backgrounding journalists that the penis was not the reason for the transfer.
The Human Rights Law Centre this morning are telling us that the principal reason that this man was transferred was a chronic wrist injury that he suffered playing a game of soccer, and that after several surgeries he needed medical treatment that wasn't available to him in PNG.
Ultimately, we can't know the truth of his medical condition because we haven't seen his record, nor can we be sure why the doctors reached their decision. But this was not the only example of Medevac being undermined by a news story which relied on confidential medical information and transfer details apparently leaked by the government. And several of these stories came from the Courier Mail's national political editor, René Valaris, detailing the high cost of transfers and the supposedly trivial ailments of unnamed refugees. And in multiple spots on Sky News, Valaris, who's a big admirer of Peter Dutton, made her opinions on Medevac abundantly clear.
There are activist doctors who use this legislation as a backdoor to get into Australia. At the end of the day, you can't be a fact skeptic. This is exactly what's happening and the facts are on the table.
Over at The Australian, this critical news story questioning the need for Medevac also got front-page treatment a few days before the vote.
The government is also concerned people complaining of trivial medical issues are being approved by doctors for transfer under the Medevac regime. In one case, a refugee in PNG was approved for transfer because of receding gums, gingivitis and a urinary tract infection.
So, was the condition trivial? Without any context, it's again hard to be sure. But as Dr. Karen Phelps, an architect of the Medevac laws, told ABC Radio,
the cases that have been leaked against the principles of privacy and confidentiality of these people have been done in a way that picks tiny little elements of a medical case, breaching privacy, and uses it as a political weapon against a legislation and against vulnerable people who need care.
Phelps has been given a good airing throughout the debate, especially in Nine's papers and on the ABC, and so have other refugee advocates. Indeed, on ABC's The Drum on the night of the repeal, former Nats Senator John Wacker-Williams was the sole voice in support of dumping the law, with a chorus of talking heads against it.
It seems to me that there's a complete lack of compassion and empathy.
I just think it's abhorrent. It was silly of them to go down this path.
Australia's reputation is absolutely shattered.
There is almost as much lack of balance there as we showed at News Corp and on Sky. The ABC could surely have found another voice in support of Medevac's repeal. But bias or tribalism apart, what's really concerning about the Medevac debate is that it was fuelled by strategic leaks of confidential information, almost certainly from the government, that put vulnerable people at risk and may well have misrepresented the issue. We asked News Corp whether they thought their coverage was fair and balanced and whether it was appropriate to publish details from private medical records, and they told us...
Any suggestion that Renee Valaris revealed the identity of an individual and their medical history is completely false.
You can read the full statement on our website. But now to another example of politics and the media, involving our freedom of information laws, which are supposed to shine a light on what our government and politicians are doing, but do not.
When a new minister gets into office, they're given a brief outlining all the issues they'll face. So we requested that brief for NDIS Minister Stuart Robert as part of the ABC's investigation into NDIS plan delays, specifically focusing on stats for kids. But the only page of statistics we got back showed the average waiting times for children from March, but those were already publicly available.
That is ABC reporter Stephanie Dalzell, who wanted to know how long it takes for kids to access the NDIS. And the answer? 49 pages of mostly blacked out text. That is not how the Freedom of Information Act is designed to work. But stonewalling is all the rage in politics these days, as the Prime Minister showed us 3 months ago in dodging reporters' questions about who he'd tried to invite to the White House dinner in September.
There's a report in the Wall Street Journal that an invitation was sought to the White House for Hillsong pastor Brian Houston, a friend of yours, and that was knocked back. Can you tell us what happened there?
No, I don't comment on gossip, honestly.
So it's not true?
It's all gossip. Yeah.
Did you actually put a request in for him to
I don't comment on gossip of stories about other stories.
With no answer forthcoming on Houston, several journalists, including SBS chief political correspondent Brett Mason, tried using the FOI laws to find out, only to be denied on the grounds that it could damage Australia's international relations. That is surely absurd. And in September, Canberra Press Gallery President David Crowe expressed disappointment at a similar knockback about what went on at the G20 summit in Japan.
There was an FOI that was put in recent weeks about Scott Morrison's visit to the G20, and this is what they got back. Happy snaps from the G20 visit, no practical information about what happened at the G20 with Scott Morrison's meeting with Donald Trump. They did ask for everything, including photographs, but when you only get that back, it just highlights the disgrace, I think.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
Yep, happy snaps of the PM at the G20 summit, which was not what journalists were seeking. But it seems to be par for the course. As FOI academic Rick Snell told MediaWatch, many government departments now blatantly dismiss the FOI Act.
They start off with the assumption they are not going to release any information. They often ignore the timelines and they claim any exemption they can think of.
And under the Act, there are many exemptions available, which the ABC has also been known to take advantage of when dealing with FOI requests. That, however, hasn't stopped ABC boss David Anderson from claiming that FOI is being foiled by government secrecy.
Authorities have become adept at classifying documents as exempt and using go-slow techniques to delay publication.
So, what can be done to fix the system? The ABC suggests limiting exemptions, reducing time and cost of applications and speeding up responses, while former Information Commissioner John McMillan says government agencies should be required to publish important information, like ministers' appointment diaries, as a matter of course. But until national FOI laws are reformed, that is not likely to happen, which means journalists can expect more stonewalling and blanked-out pages from their FOI requests. But now to Samoa, and a compelling example, if you ever needed one, of why children should be vaccinated.
Samoa has effectively shut down the country for 2 days in a desperate attempt to inoculate the population against the deadly measles outbreak, which has already killed 60 people.
Yet last Wednesday, on the same evening as that news report, ABC listeners in Tasmania were hearing a very different story about immunisation.
It's a very comforting thing to think the vaccines are safe and effective, and no one wishes that was true more than me. But it's not true.
That is the president of the Vaccination Risks Network, Anita Hafmeister, on ABC Radio in Tasmania. And in that 10-minute interview, Hafmeister was allowed to make a series of bogus or unsubstantiated claims about the risks of vaccination.
One of the biggest dangers to immune-compromised children are recently vaccinated children. There are live virus vaccines like the MMR vaccine and the chickenpox, the varicella vaccine. Those are live virus vaccines that can shed.
So, was that challenged by interviewer Kaya Clayton? No, it was not, nor were any of Hafmeister's other assertions. And the deaths in Samoa did not rate a mention. But there was a sympathetic ear when the interview wrapped up.
Thank you so much for giving me your time and for speaking to me about this challenging issue across the planet. I think everyone's voice needs to be heard.
Well, in this case, we do not agree, and nor does the ABC's Dr. Norman Swan, who told Media Watch,
"This story hides behind a misplaced view of ABC's need for balance. There is no balance possible between facts and non-science."
And clearly, many listeners were furious because the next day, host Paul McIntyre made a stunning admission.
Last night, I broadcast an interview with the Australian Vaccination Risks Network, which contained some controversial claims about the risks of vaccines. Clearly, this failed the pub test. I'd like to acknowledge that the claims made last night need to be interrogated and fact-checked by a medical expert.
And so, to fix the damage, McIntyre invited vaccine researcher Dr. Jessica Kaufman to debunk the anti-vaxxer message.
There's not a risk of actually catching the measles from being around someone who has been vaccinated with a live vaccine. That's just an overstated and misrepresented argument.
But why did ABC Hobart put the Vaccination Risks Network to air unchallenged in the first place? Short answer, it shouldn't have done. And ABC management admitted the programme did not meet its editorial standards.
It failed to balance that interview with information from vaccine and immunisation experts. The program also failed to upwardly refer the decision to devote a segment solely to an anti-vaxxer. Had it done so, the interview would not have taken place.
The ABC says the programme team is being, quote, counselled. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. And finally tonight to the Alice in Wonderland world of women's magazines, where truth has been abandoned in the desperate search for readers. And just when you thought they could not get worse, they have.
Harry and Meghan divorce! The fight that ended it all!
Meghan's secret daughter!
The pics she tried to hide.
Women's Day and New Idea have always loved a royal cover, but in 2019 they've hit absurd new levels, and their key target is Meghan Markle. This year, New Idea featured her on no less than 32 covers, while Women's Day has done 6 better with 38. And no story is too outlandish.
Harry and Meghan, the end.
Meghan moves out of Kensington Palace.
Harry and Meghan divorced!
Photo exclusive.
Royal family in shock.
According to the mags, Meghan and Harry have been divorced or divorcing some 14 times. And that is quite remarkable because there's also an awful lot of baby making.
Harry confirms baby number 2.
Breaking news.
Pregnant again, already.
Meghan and Harry.
Baby sister for Archie.
Meghan is also shaking up the palace with her shocking plans.
Queen outraged.
Meghan tells.
Our baby will be a vegan.
And then there's her ongoing feud with Kate. And surprise, surprise, that picture of Kate fleeing the palace in tears was actually taken at a birthday party at her sister's. You'll be shocked to hear that none of the stories has turned out to be true, and you'd have to agree with Prince Harry that some were, quote, knowingly false and malicious, a label he recently applied to stories about Meghan in the UK tabloids.
I've never read a statement from a member of the royal family like this. Harry is clearly furious.
This specific press pack has vilified her almost daily for the past 9 months. They've been able to create lie after lie at her expense simply because she has not been visible while on maternity leave.
Which brings us to the question we've asked many times before: how do they get away with it? Well, in the UK, the tabloids may not, because Harry and Meghan are suing the Daily Mail, The Sun and the Mirror Group. But in Australia, no one is yet suing the women's mags, or not since Rebel Wilson, and no regulator has the power to make them tell the truth. Meanwhile, readers either haven't noticed the stories are rubbish or don't care if they are. And crazy stories about the royals clearly sell better than anything else. So I'm afraid to say you can expect more trash from the mags in 2020. And that's all from us for tonight and for the year. Thanks for watching, and thanks to all of our viewers who write to us in love or in loathing. We'll see you in 2020. Goodbye.